Have you ever wondered what really happened to the lost Roanoke colonists? For over 400 years, their disappearance has baffled historians, leaving only a cryptic word carved into a tree as a clue. Could some trace of them still exist, hidden in plain sight? Could modern science finally answer a centuries-old mystery that has haunted generations? Keep watching as we uncover what scientists found when they analyzed the DNA of the Roanoke colonists, and why the results are so disturbing the birth of a colony. In the late 16th century, England was restless. Queen Elizabeth I's court was full of ambition, rivalry, and a desire to expand across oceans, following Spain's example. Sir Walter Raleigh, favored by the Queen and eager to plant England's flag in the New World, secured permission to establish settlements in North America. What followed was a colonization experiment that would become one of the greatest historical puzzles of all time. The Roanoke colony, founded in 1587, was intended to be a permanent English outpost on the edge of the vast and largely unknown continent. Instead, it disappeared almost without a trace. When the colonists first landed on Roanoke Island, off the coast of present-day North Carolina, their hopes were high, but so were the challenges. The group included men, women, and children, about 115 settlers in total. This was unusual, as most early expeditions were made up of soldiers or adventurers. Bringing families showed that this was meant to be more than a temporary venture. These people planned to build homes, grow crops, and create an English community across the Atlantic. Among them was Eleanor Dare, daughter of the colony's governor, John White, who would soon give birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. Even as it began, the story of Roanoke was becoming legendary. The settlers faced a precarious situation. Relations with local tribes were uneasy at best. Some groups, like the Croatan, showed cautious willingness to interact with the English, while others had already grown hostile. The land itself was harsh. The sandy soil made farming difficult, supplies ran out quickly, and being so far from England meant the colony depended heavily on resupply voyages. John White understood the colony could not survive on its own. Later that year, he made the difficult decision to return to England to gather more provisions and support. His departure may have seemed temporary, but fate had other plans. When White returned to England, the country was in turmoil. The threat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 drew every available ship into defense. For years, White's attempts to return were delayed, blocked, or ignored. It was not until 1590 that he finally secured passage back across the Atlantic. 3 years had passed since he left the settlers on Roanoke Island, including his daughter and granddaughter. The scene awaiting him was both haunting and unforgettable. As White's men reached shore, they found the settlement eerily quiet. Houses had been dismantled, defensive structures removed, and the colonists had vanished. No bodies, no signs of violence, nothing to suggest a massacre or sudden disaster. Only 2 cryptic carvings remained. The letters CRO were etched into a tree, and the word Croatoan appeared on a post at the fort's entrance. For White, this might have been a sign of hope, as the colonists had agreed to carve a destination if they relocated. Yet when he searched further, storms forced his ships back to sea before he could reach Croatan Island, now called Hatteras. What White discovered was more than an empty settlement. It was the start of a mystery that would endure for centuries. Roanoke was not simply another failed colony. It was a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. The settlers had disappeared so completely that even with modern archaeology, their fate remains unconfirmed. In the years that followed, England shifted its focus elsewhere, eventually finding more permanent success in Jamestown. But Roanoke remained in the national imagination as the colony that disappeared into the shadows. This opening chapter leaves us at the start of one of history's greatest mysteries. A thriving group of men, women, and children who crossed the Atlantic seeking a new life had vanished. The only proof of their existence was the weathered remains of their camp and a single word carved into wood. The question that has haunted historians, scientists, and descendants for over 400 years is chilling. Where did they go? The Vanishing Act. When John White finally returned to Roanoke Island in August 1590, he must have felt both relief and dread. He had been gone far longer than planned, caught in England's war with Spain. Every delay tormented him, because his daughter Eleanor and infant granddaughter Virginia Dare had been left behind with over 100 settlers. As his men walked through the surf onto familiar sand, he expected reunion. Instead, he found silence. Structures were dismantled, defensive palisades carefully removed, and homes, long abandoned, fires had burned out, leaving only ash scattered on the ground. The most striking detail was the absence of struggle. If enemies had attacked, there would have been weapons, bodies, or signs of violence. Instead, it seemed the colonists had simply left. The two carvings, CRO on a tree and Croatan on a post, pointed toward Croatan Island, about 50 miles south, where the Croatan tribe lived. This clue was not random. White and the colonists had agreed on a code. If they relocated, they would carve the destination. If forced to leave under duress, they would carve a Maltese cross. No cross was present. To White, this suggested they left willingly, but he could not confirm it. Storms battered his ship as he attempted to reach Croatan Island, and his men refused to risk further delay. Supplies were low, seas rough, and winter was coming. White was forced to return to England, never seeing his family again. He died years later, still wondering what became of them. That decision, leaving without investigating Croatan Island, cemented Roanoke as one of history's most tantalizing mysteries. From that point on, speculation grew. Some believed the colonists joined the Croatan tribe, blending into their community. Early explorers in the 1600s reported European-looking people among local tribes. Others suggest they moved inland toward Albemarle Sound, seeking fertile land. Some think they attempted to sail north to Chesapeake Bay, the original settlement target, and were lost at sea. The disappearance of over 100 men, women, and children entered legend. By the time Jamestown was founded in 1607, Roanoke was already considered lost, a ghostly reminder of England's fragile early attempts at colonization. The mystery deepened over generations. Writers turned it into folklore. Poets, novelists, and playwrights used the abandoned colony as a symbol of crushed hope. In early American history, Roanoke was remembered less for its efforts than for its absence. The haunting silence of the settlement became a canvas for imagination. Even today, the disappearance intrigues because it defies closure. White's testimony, the missing colonists, and the word Croatoan all invite questions without clear answers. Was this a story of survival through assimilation? Did English families intermarry with native tribes and continue their lives in new forms? Or was it a cautionary tale of a community consumed by the wilderness? Without definitive proof, the Vanishing Act at Roanoke became more than history. It became a legend about what happens when hope, desperation, and the unknown collide at the edge of a new world. Even legends leave traces. Archaeologists, historians, and now genetic researchers have pursued them. Each generation hopes it might be the one to solve the mystery. If Roanoke vanished, it left just enough clues to keep the search alive. The carvings, the missing homes, the unanswered questions. These were not an ending, but the start of a mystery, lasting over 4 centuries. Theories through the centuries. When Roanoke disappeared, it left a void that people have tried to fill ever since. Over time, countless theories have emerged, shaped by knowledge, imagination, and the cultural context of the era. Some were evidence-based, others leaned toward folklore. What unites them all is that no theory has ever been proven, keeping the mystery alive. One early theory, favored by John White, was that the colonists joined the Croatan tribe on Hatteras Island. The carved word Croatan seemed to confirm this, and White believed the colonists left voluntarily for generations. Travelers reported seeing light-skinned individuals with European features or English-style clothing among local tribes. The strongest link is with the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. Oral histories and cultural practices suggest intermarriage with Europeans as early as the late 1500s. Some 18th century settlers reported Lumbee members speaking English, using familiar surnames, and building homes similar to colonial styles. For many, this is the most plausible explanation. The colonists survived by integrating into native communities. Other theories exist. Some propose the settlers tried to reach Chesapeake Bay, the original settlement site, and may have perished at sea. Supporters point out that White found no remains on Roanoke, suggesting the group left rather than died there. Without solid evidence, the idea remains speculative. Another possibility is conflict with hostile tribes. Relations with groups like the Secatan had already soured before White's departure. Colonists, low on food and without military support, could have been attacked. Yet the absence of remains puzzles historians. A massacre would likely have left bones, weapons, or destroyed structures. Starvation and disease are also plausible explanations. Life on the edge of the continent was harsh. Poor soil, interrupted supplies, and unfamiliar diseases could have wiped out the colony survivors may have scattered, leaving little trace. Over centuries, the Roanoke story grew into legend, inspiring supernatural theories. In the 19th and 20th centuries, writers added ghost stories, curses, and witchcraft tales. Croatan became a symbol in folklore, appearing in literature, poetry, and even on the lips of famous figures like Edgar Allan Poe. These imaginative twists kept the story alive, while researchers sought evidence. Modern archaeology has revisited the mystery. Excavations on Hatteras Island at Cape Creek and Buxton uncovered European artifacts from the late 16th century: gun parts, glass, writing slates, and a Nuremberg token. Some scholars believe these belonged to colonists who joined the Croatan. Meanwhile, inland digs at sites along Albemarle Sound revealed fragments of English pottery, suggesting another group moved inland. The emerging picture is not a single answer, but dispersal. Families splitting to survive. What keeps the mystery alive is the gaps in every theory. No bodies, no definitive structures, no signed letters. Only scattered traces hint at assimilation, migration, or disappearance, depending on interpretation. Each generation builds on the last, but the story resists closure. Now genetics has entered the discussion. If pottery and artifacts cannot answer, perhaps DNA can. Researchers began asking whether descendants of the lost colony still live among us, hidden within modern families in the Carolinas and Virginia. This inquiry marks one of the most fascinating chapters in the Roanoke story: the search for proof hidden in our very blood. The science of ancestry. For centuries, the fate of the Roanoke colonists remained a mystery, pieced together only from carved words, scattered artifacts, and whispered stories. In recent decades, however, a new tool promised to cut through the uncertainty: DNA. The goal was straightforward, yet revolutionary. If the colonists had descendants, traces of their genetic markers might still exist in people living today. For the first time, science offered a chance to trace bloodlines across 4 centuries, potentially confirming survival where history had left only silence interest. In this idea surged in the early 2000s with the launch of the Lost Colony DNA Project. Coordinated by genetic genealogists and historians, the project invited people with roots in eastern North Carolina and Virginia to submit DNA samples. The focus was on families carrying surnames of the 1587 colonists, including names like Dare, Cooper, and Brown. By comparing Y DNA and mitochondrial DNA from modern participants with documented lineages in England, researchers aimed to uncover connections that traditional records had lost. On paper, the approach seemed simple, but in reality, it became far more complex. 4 centuries of migration, intermarriage, and population movement blurred genetic signals. Even if John Brown or Eleanor Dare had descendants, their DNA would have mixed with countless others, diluting markers beyond easy recognition. Adding to the challenge, Native American genetic records from the 16th century are limited. If colonists integrated with tribes such as the Croatan or Secotone, the resulting lineages would be hard to separate from other historical mixing. But still, intriguing hints emerged. Some modern families with colonial surnames showed genetic matches to English lineages from regions tied to the original settlers. Others carried unusual markers, raising questions about their origins. None of this constituted definitive proof, but it fueled speculation that some colonists had survived. In particular, the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, long suspected of having links to the lost colony, became a focus. Oral traditions suggested that their ancestors included Europeans, and certain cultural traits seemed to support this idea. Yet while the DNA results were suggestive, they could not be considered conclusive. These challenges highlight why the Roanoke mystery endures. Genetics can reveal shared ancestry, but it cannot yet pinpoint the exact moment when 2 family lines converged. Did this occur in 1587 on the Carolina coast, or during a later migration? This uncertainty means each new discovery is debated. Some scientists urge caution, warning against overinterpreting partial data. Others argue that even ambiguous results support the assimilation theory, gradually building a pattern of evidence rather than delivering a single smoking gun. What makes the DNA search so compelling is the sense that the colonists are still speaking, not through journals or ruins, but through people alive today. Even one confirmed direct connection would transform the lost colony from a historical mystery into a story of survival, endurance, and unexpected legacy. Reports suggest researchers believe they are closer than ever, and rumors of a breakthrough continue to circulate. Whether the evidence is strong enough to rewrite history remains uncertain, but the search has opened a new front in one of America's oldest mysteries, bringing us closer to the moment when claims of descent might finally be confirmed. Whispers in the blood. For generations, the disappearance of the Roanoke colonists has been one of history's great unsolved mysteries. Theories of assimilation, migration, and catastrophe have all competed for attention, but no explanation has ever prevailed. That is why recent reports of genetic evidence linking modern families to the colonists have caused a stir in both scholarly circles and popular imagination. According to those involved, DNA now confirms descendants of the Roanoke colony, potentially reshaping history. The claim emerged only after years of painstaking work comparing genetic markers from individuals in eastern North Carolina and Virginia, with records of English lineages tied to the 1587 settlers. Families carrying surnames such as Brown, Cooper, and Dare participated in the testing, with results feeding into databases spanning continents. Over time, patterns emerged. Certain markers that had been unexplained in earlier generations aligned with genetic signatures from areas in England that had supplied settlers' reports suggest this alignment was unlikely to be coincidental and pointed toward evidence of survival. The findings indicate that at least some colonists did not perish on Roanoke Island, but instead found a way to endure archaeological evidence on Hatteras Island, and inland supports the idea that some settlers joined the Croatan tribe, while others moved inland along Albemarle Sound over the centuries. Their bloodlines intermingled with native families and later European settlers, blending into the fabric of local communities. What modern geneticists claim to have discovered is not a detailed map of individual lives, but a faint echo preserved in the DNA of descendants. If accurate, the implications are significant. Roanoke has long been viewed as a tragedy, a symbol of failure and loss. This discovery reframes it as a story of adaptation and endurance. The colonists may not have vanished but transformed, their identities absorbed into new cultures while their bloodlines continued. In this view, the so-called lost colony was never truly lost, only hidden in plain sight among descendants living today. Skeptics urge caution. Genetic genealogy is not flawless. While it can indicate shared ancestry, it cannot always establish the precise historical point at which two lines merged. Could these markers belong to descendants of later English arrivals in the same area? Could coincidence explain some similarities? Critics argue these possibilities cannot yet be dismissed, meaning the announcement remains a claim rather than a confirmed conclusion. Still, the symbolic significance cannot be ignored. For the Lumbee tribe, whose oral histories long held that their ancestors intermarried with the colonists, the DNA evidence offers validation for historians. It opens the door to rewriting one of the earliest chapters of English America, shifting the narrative from disappearance to survival for the public. It injects new life into a mystery that has fascinated people for over 4 centuries. The carved word at Roanoke, Croatoan, may have been the only direct clue John White saw. But the truth may have been carried in the descendants themselves. If DNA has indeed confirmed their lineage, the colonists' legacy was not erased by time or tragedy. It persists in families who never knew they were part of the earliest English story on American soil. Of course, doubt remains important. Reports emphasize that the findings are under review, that not all scholars are convinced, and that additional testing is ongoing. Even so, the idea that the Roanoke mystery may be solved not through artifacts or old maps, but through the bloodlines of living people is powerful. It suggests history is not only preserved in books and ruins, it lives within us. The story of Roanoke may never have a single clear ending, but if DNA has revealed its descendants, history has shifted. The lost colony may no longer be remembered as a disappearance, but as a transformation. If so, the centuries-old legend has entered a new chapter, one that could change how we understand America's roots. The aftermath and the debate. The news that DNA may have linked modern families to the Roanoke colonists reverberated far beyond academia. Newspapers, local communities, and tribal organizations seized on the possibility that one of America's oldest mysteries might finally have an answer. Reports indicate that confirming Roanoke descendants through DNA is more than a scientific milestone. It is a cultural moment, reshaping ideas of survival, identity, and legacy. For the Lumbee tribe, the discovery resonated deeply. Oral tradition has long held that their ancestors included Europeans from the lost colony, with surnames, language, and cultural practices cited as evidence, often met with skepticism. Now genetic research appears to support their story, giving weight to traditions frequently dismissed. Tribal leaders emphasize, however, that identity does not rely solely on external validation. DNA alone cannot capture the full complexity of ancestry and heritage. Historians and archaeologists have had mixed reactions. Some welcome the findings as the strongest evidence yet that colonists survived through assimilation. They argue the DNA results align with archaeological discoveries on Hatteras Island and inland, suggesting dispersal rather than disappearance. Others remain cautious. Genetic genealogy can demonstrate shared ancestry, but cannot pinpoint the exact historical context in which family lines converged without definitive documentation tying colonists directly to these descendants. Skeptics maintain the story remains unproven. The debate has extended into public imagination. Roanoke has always carried a sense of mystery, and some are reluctant to let it go. Stories of ghosts and supernatural speculation have thrived for centuries. If DNA now indicates that the colonists lived, married, raised children, and left descendants, the legend shifts from disappearance to survival. Some see this as inspiring, others as anticlimactic. The discovery, if confirmed, changes the narrative. Rather than a failed experiment swallowed by the wilderness, the lost colony becomes a story of resilience. Families arriving in 1587 did not simply vanish, they adapted, survived, and became part of America's earliest communities. If you found this video fascinating, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more intriguing history discoveries. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think really happened to the Roanoke colonists? And don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss our latest videos.